On Wednesday, the American Federation of Teachers hosted a conversation about the situation in the Middle East with leaders of Standing Together, a grassroots group of Jews and Palestinians who are fighting for peace, security, justice, and self-determination. Joining me now are the co-chairs of that organization, Rula Daood and Alon-Lee Green, and the president of the American Federation of Teachers, Randi Weingarten. Thank you all for joining me tonight. Randi, let's start with you. I know that you and the AFT have a long history of international activism. You've spent a considerable amount of time in places like Israel and Ukraine to advocate for global justice. But my first question is to Rula. And then I'm going to you, Alon. In your perspectives, what motivated you to collaborate and hold this conversation in this moment, in this time, or at this time? Rula, let me start with you.
Yeah, of course. I think living in the Middle East, in Israel and Palestine, and living in a reality where our politicians and our government has told us year after year that the only way we can live is by continuous wars in the region. And this is not the first war we've had between Israel and Hamas, and I do hope it's the last one. And I think it's time for us to understand in what way we can live in this land that can give both of us security, safety, and independence. Because in my land, there is one truth. We have two people living, the Jewish people and the Palestinian people. None of us is going anywhere, and it's about time to understand what will be the next steps for all of us to have real liberty, to have real independence and real equality between both sides. And I think as much as the 7th of October was a horrific day with the massacre and 5 months of bombing Gaza and killing innocent people, we still have an opportunity and a chance to change the status quo, because we definitely understand that it cannot be maintained anymore, and we need to get to solutions, agreements. We need to understand that we must have a ceasefire that will bring back the hostages and save innocent lives in Gaza.
Alon?
Yeah, I think that what we understand is that in our country, in the two, among the two people that live there, there is a real need to see a different reality. And this is why we choose to bring both Palestinians and Jews together to rally and protest and organize against this war and for Israeli-Palestinian peace. We do understand that we have a very extreme government in Israel that is not only bad for the Palestinians, it's also very bad for the Jewish people living in our country. This war is not going to bring us more safety. It's actually setting back the entire region to a very, very terrible place. So this is why we insist on pointing on an alternative to the occupation, an alternative to the ways of war and military campaigns. And this alternative is an Israeli-Palestinian peace agreement in which all the people that live on this land are equal, free, and independent.
Now, Randi, your long activism on this has been written about in a piece titled, "Most U.S. Jews Don't Want to Choose. They can stand with Israel and stand with Palestinians." You personally come from a Jewish background. What do you say to those who support the peace and livelihoods of both Israelis and Palestinians, but are struggling to navigate their feelings and activisms around this war, feeling like they have to choose a side?
Well, number one, and you know this, Rev, probably better than most, life is complicated, and there's a lot of harm, and there's a lot of trauma that happened, not just on October 7th, but before October 7th. And so what happens is that, and you that article was written by, about Sharon, my wife, and myself after we returned, or while we were in Israel in November. We have to reject the binary. There's real trauma on all sides. And as Rula and Alon-Lee said, and they are heroes to me, there are people, 7 million Palestinians and 7 million Jews, Nobody's going anywhere. So that the choice is further bloodshed and violence, or a sense that Netanyahu and others tell the Israelis that says the only way you can have peace is if we have oppression of others, or this third way, which is what Rula and Alon-Lee are talking about, which is how do we get to freedom, justice, independence, self-determination for all. And that's what happened in Ireland, and that is what's happened in other places in the world. And that is what the civil rights battle is in Israel and in the Palestinian territories right now. We have to get to safety, and we have to get to freedom. And that means people like Alon-Lee and Rula, who on the ground are changing the reality and creating this third way, are so important. And that's why we ask them to come to the United States, to reject the binary, and to have this conversation.
Now, Rula, let me ask you this. The U.S. is now calling for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza, tied to the release of the Israeli hostages under Hamas captivity. Are you satisfied with how the U.S. is currently mitigating this situation?
I would be satisfied once we see people going back to their homes, once we see the starvation ends in Gaza, once the hostages are back in their homes, rebuilding Gaza, and not giving an unlimited aid to Israel in a military way that can give it more power to have more wars and to have more demolition inside of Gaza. The only way I will be satisfied is when we see agreements that benefit all people, and also realizing that the power dynamics is very different and it's unequal. But we will be satisfied right now if the war stops, if the bombing stops, if the hostages go back to their homes, and from that point start to build and rebuild the lives of the people in Gaza and also in the south of Israel.
Now, Alon, I'm particularly concerned about how this war is fueling hate against both Jews and Muslim members of their communities. Here in America, anti-Semitic incidents have more than tripled in the 3 months following the October 7th Hamas attack in Israel, according to the ADL. And we've seen cases about how the rhetoric around this war has fed into anti-Palestinian violence. How do you think this issue can be combated?
Well, we need to remember that criticizing Israel is legitimate. Criticizing Hamas is legitimate. Fighting both ways of the Messianic and extremists in Israel and of the people that are controlling Gaza, the Hamas, is a good thing to do. But when you mix this, when you pollute these legitimate fights with turning against communities, against people, against Jewish people or against Muslim people, against Palestinians or against all Israelis, you're actually doing something that is not only not helping the cause, it's also very not moral to do. And I think that we need to understand that this is a moment for a big coalition of both Israelis and Palestinians, Jews and Palestinians, people from all across communities here also in the US that will ask themselves, what are we looking for? What is the goal we want to achieve? And how do we work to achieve it together? Don't create entrances rules to say who's in the club and who's outside the club. Every person that supports a ceasefire, supports the end of the war and Israeli-Palestinian peace should be fighting together.
Yep. Well, I want to thank you, Rula and Alon, for being with us. Randi Weingarten for putting this important discussion together with the American Federation of Teachers. And thank you for coming on, talking about it on Politics Nation. And good luck to all.